All right, welcome back to ABA Exam Review and the continuation of our RBT Practice Exam series, where we're going through another set of questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. When you pass the exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. Sam frequently taps his pencil on the desk during class. His teacher normally will tell him to stop, but data show that Sam's behavior is not changing despite the reprimands. This week, the teacher hasn't told Sam anything, and the behavior has started to decrease. What is the likely function based on this information? So we have a function question. And remember, functions explain why behavior occurs. What is the effect on the environment? Functions also help explain what is reinforcing or maintaining the behavior. Now, what do we know so far about Sam's behavior? Because we want to identify why that behavior is occurring. We know he taps his pencil during class. We know the teacher normally reprimands him by telling him to stop, but it has no effect on Sam's behavior. So, meaning Sam is continuing to tap his pencil despite being told to stop. So even though it's say the explanation says the behavior isn't changing, it's safe to assume that the reprimands are at least maintaining Sam's behavior. And why can we assume that? Well, because this week the teacher didn't tell Sam anything and the behavior started to decrease. In other words, Sam would tap his pencil, Sam would get reprimanded, Sam kept tapping his pencil. If Sam tapped his pencil and the teacher didn't say anything, Sam would stop tapping his pencil. So why do we think Sam's behavior is occurring? A, to obtain a tangible. Is Sam trying to get some sort of object or item or stimulus? No. What he's doing is he's tapping his pencil so that the teacher will tell him something. How do we know that? Again, when the teacher tells him to stop, the behavior continues. If teacher says nothing, the behavior doesn't continue and starts to decrease. Do we think Sam is trying to escape? Well, nowhere in this explanation does it look like he's trying to escape. It looks like he's working for attention. In other words, he's engaging in his pencil tapping behavior to get the teacher to say something to him and give him some of that attention. And it isn't automatic because this is socially mediated. If a behavior has an automatic function, it means there's not another person involved. It's automatic, sometimes called sensory. In this case, based on this information, it appears Sam's behavior is happening for attention. When you plan date night with your partner, you always check first how many stars a restaurant has based on reviews. If the restaurant has less than 4 stars, you do not go to that restaurant. A rating of less than 4 stars is likely a blank relative to not going to the restaurant. All right, so let's think about this. We have a behavior question, and we have a question asking about something relative to something else. So we're looking at the effect of the 4 stars or less than 4 stars on not going to a restaurant. So let's first identify, is less than 4 stars an antecedent or a consequence? What's an antecedent? When you have less than 4 stars, it evokes a behavior of avoidance. We don't go to the restaurant. So this is clearly an antecedent of not going to the restaurant, meaning we can rule out consequences. Now, is this a motivating operation or a discriminative stimulus? Well, it's going to act as an SD in this case because it's signaling to you that if you avoid the restaurant with less than 4 stars, you're going to get a consequence of avoiding the bad restaurant. So you're avoiding or escaping the bad restaurant. You're probably going to be negatively reinforced because you've avoided going to a bad restaurant by not going to a restaurant of less than 4 stars. So the rating of less than 4 stars is the SD to avoid going to the restaurant. It's the SD for engaging in avoidance when you do not go to a restaurant of less than 4 stars. It doesn't necessarily increase or decrease the value of something based on satiation or deprivation. It's simply signaling to you that there is reinforcement to be had for not going to the bad restaurant. So the rating of less than 4 stars is likely a SD relative to not going to the restaurant. Kyle rarely eats dessert anymore, but when he does, he typically eats enough to make himself feel sick. He gets so excited to eat the dessert that he just can't help himself after not having any dessert for so long. What happens that increases the value of the dessert? If you start getting questions about value increasing or decreasing, you want to start thinking motivating operations. Motivating operations increase or decrease the value of stimuli, the value of consequences. And typically that happens through deprivation or satiation. Now, when we talk about deprivation, what are we talking about? When you are deprived of something, that means you're not getting enough of something. And when you're deprived of something, that thing you're deprived of becomes more valuable. When you're satiated on something, you're getting too much of something. And whatever you're satiated on becomes less valuable. So if Kyle rarely eats dessert, but when he does get to eat dessert, he eats enough to make himself feel sick. What is going on? Well, it says right in the question, he gets so excited to eat that dessert because he hasn't had any for so long. So is Kyle deprived or satiated on dessert? Well, he's deprived. So what's increased the value of the dessert? Well, A, Kyle has been deprived of dessert. Kyle is not satiated on dessert because he's never getting dessert. When he finally gets a chance to eat dessert, he eats too much because he's been deprived. C, Kyle has no self-control. We're not going to describe something that way because that is not ABA or behavior analytic in nature. It's much better to use our terminology of motivating operations. And then D, not enough information. Well, it tells you right in the question that Kyle has been deprived of the dessert. And through that deprivation, the dessert becomes more valuable. So when he gets a chance to eat the dessert, he starts eating too much of it. What happens that increases the value of the dessert? A, Kyle is deprived of that dessert. A behavior technician wants to measure how often a child engages in hand flapping behavior during a 30-minute observation period. The therapist records whether hand flapping occurred at the end of each 5-minute interval until the 30 minutes are up. What type of measurement are they using? So we have a measurement question. And when you have a measurement question, ask yourself first, are we continuously measuring or are we discontinuously measuring? Are we using a full sample or are we using interval recordings? Well, in this case, we're using 30-minute observation periods and breaking them down into intervals. So we obviously have some sort of interval recording. If we have interval recording, we have discontinuous measurement. We can eliminate our continuous measurement examples. Now, in this case, when you have interval recording, you have to identify when is data collected. When does a response count? For this therapist, they are recording at the end of each interval. So if we're taking data, not during the interval, but at the end of each interval, what type of measurement are we using? A, whole interval recording. Now, with whole interval recording, if we have 5-minute intervals, that behavior has to happen that whole 5 minutes. That's what we mean by whole interval recording. If we have B, partial interval recording, then that behavior only has to happen for a piece of the interval. 1 second is enough for partial interval recording. What we're doing here, though, if we're looking at the end of each 5-minute interval, we're looking at momentary time sampling. With momentary time sampling, we're looking at the very end of each interval. If the behavior is occurring at the end, we count it. If it's not occurring, we don't count it. So we're looking at momentary time sampling in this example. And then frequency recording is obviously taking account continuous. We can eliminate that. If the therapist is looking at the end of each 5-minute interval, each time the interval until the 30 minutes are up, they are using momentary time sampling. You're teaching a child to brush their teeth. Initially, you provide physical guidance to help them hold the toothbrush and brush their teeth. Over time, you gradually reduce to physical assistance until the child can complete the task independently. What prompting technique are you using? All right, so we have a prompting question. Remember, prompts can go in hierarchies and we have different strategies for prompting. In this case, we're teaching teeth brushing, and we are providing full physical guidance to hold the toothbrush and brush the teeth. So this looks like some full physical prompting to begin. But over time, what are you doing? Well, you're reducing physical assistance gradually. Now, be very careful here, okay? This says gradually reduce, and you have this option of graduated guidance. Graduated guidance is much quicker than this. Graduated guidance says you're only using as much physical prompting as necessary and then immediately fading it out. In this example, you're starting with full physical and gradually fading out the prompting until it's no longer needed. So, what are we using here? Are we using most to least to most, or errorless? If we're using errorless, it's going to specify we're preventing all mistakes. In this case, we don't have that specification, and it shows we are going from that physical guidance to no physical assistance. So what we're doing is we're going from the most intrusive prompt to a less intrusive prompt. The type of prompting we're going to be using is a most to least. With least to most, it's the reverse, right? We're going to use the least intrusive prompt and then work our way towards the most intrusive prompt. And then again, graduated guidance is when you use as much physical prompting as necessary and then immediately fade it out. So the prompting technique used here would be most to least, starting with that full physical and fading as necessary until the child can be independent. Thank you for watching. Check out btexamreview.com for all our study materials. When you pass your exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Make sure you subscribe, work hard, study hard, and see you soon.